Hey, what's up, everybody? So, today I want to share something concerning arguments for the existence of God, arguments for Christianity, theistic proofs. I'm using all of those things synonymously in this video, but I want to share something today concerning those things that I think will help both skeptics and Christians think about those things differently. So, both skeptics and Christians can have the idea that theistic arguments, arguments for Christianity, that they're meant to produce belief. And that's not the role of apologetics. That's not the role of arguments for Christianity to produce belief. And before I get into the role of theistic arguments, I want to share something that I think we often fail to realize. So, our most deeply held beliefs are not beliefs that we arrived at by virtue of rational argumentation, at least most of those beliefs. Consider, for instance, who convinced you that your memory was reliable before you began to trust in your memory? Or who convinced you that logic, rationality, rational inquiry were valid ways, reliable ways to seek out truth? Or who convinced you about the reality of the external world, that we're not in the matrix, before you begin to believe that this is the actual world, that we're really not in the matrix? So these are a few things that we believe prior to having arguments for those things. We generally just trust our memory, we trust our rational faculties. We assume that our family and friends, our children, have value and dignity before anybody ever proves those things to us. Yet sometimes we raise the bar higher when it comes to knowledge, when we bring that to bear on the existence of God or arguments for the truth of Christianity. We act as if, unless we have these knockdown arguments without any holes, without any objections, then belief in God is not rational, or we really can't know that God exists or that Christianity is true. And I just want to say that that bar doesn't even hold up to some of our own beliefs outside of Christianity. Now, there's a lot more to that discussion, but the main thing I want to point out is that when it comes to knowledge, belief, certainty, these things are way more robust than we often realize. A lot of times when we're talking about knowledge, belief, certainty, we're talking at like the tip of the iceberg when there is so much more below the surface. So these are the kind of things that philosophers obsess about. And sometimes, yes, they can go off the rails and become too skeptical or too sophisticated concerning very basic truths. But there is a complexity to knowledge, belief, and certainty. Scientific investigation is a form of investigation. Rational investigation is a form of investigation. And just as they are forms of investigation, they provide a form of knowledge, a form of certainty, but they don't necessarily give you the truth. They don't necessarily provide you with all forms of certainty. And the idea that only scientific certainty is the only valid certainty, and that only scientific or rational knowledge is the only valid sort of knowledge, is really a Western or cultural bias. So, from a biblical standpoint, all knowledge is revealed, especially the knowledge of God. And I just want to read a few verses that show this point. So, Proverbs 2:6 says, "For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding." Daniel 2:21 says, "He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding." Colossians 2:2 through 3 says, "Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge." Proverbs 1:7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." Proverbs 9:10, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight." Again, there's a whole lot more to that, but for now, I want to bring all that to bear on the whole discussion of theistic arguments, apologetics, theistic proofs. Why, if all knowledge is revelational in nature, if all knowledge comes from God, if He reveals insight and gives understanding and gives wisdom, why is it that we support or even get into these apologetic discussions, these arguments for the existence of God? And this is where I want to invite you to think differently about the role of arguments, namely to see arguments as witnesses to the truth and reality of the Christian faith. I want to give credit to the Reformed theologian Herman Bavinck, who first helped me put language to this whole approach to looking at theistic arguments and arguments for the existence of God. Um, when you look at apologetics or these arguments as witnesses, they better help you put them where they need to be put in terms of their role in faith formation. So when you think about arguments as witnesses, if you think again about those beliefs that we have, that we didn't arrive at through rational argumentation. The reliability of our memory, the reality of the external world, uh, our trust in logic and rationality as a way to discover truth. It's not that we don't have arguments for those things. It's that we came to believe in those things before those arguments. Yet those arguments are powerful witnesses for them. When we argue for the reliability of logic, when we argue for the reliability of scientific study or whatever those beliefs are that we argue for, we don't typically argue to produce beliefs in ourselves. We argue to lend credit to the beliefs that we have. They are powerful witnesses to the realities that we already know to be. In that way, they help belief flourish, even though they don't produce belief. And they also help us to lend credit to those beliefs when we're sharing with other people. So I want to speak to those of you who have been probably scouring the internet and looking at debates, who are genuinely curious or halfway convinced of the truth of Christianity. I just want to invite you not to expect more from these arguments than you should. These things aren't meant to produce belief, and God imparts knowledge differently. Again, scientific investigation is a valid form of investigation. Similarly, rational inquiry is a valid form of investigation. But the kind of knowledge that God provides is far more robust in those things. It's rational, but it's also experiential. It's also spiritual. And as Christians, we believe that the Spirit gives knowledge. The Spirit literally bears witness with our spirit of the truthfulness of Christianity and the witness of Jesus Christ Himself. In Christianity, faith is a source of knowledge, and the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And we believe that in His light, we see light. It's because that we just trust His testimony and we just believe that He is and that His word is true, that everything else in life makes sense. Now, again, we do have arguments, but those arguments bear witness to the reality that the Spirit has already confirmed in us. So if you're a skeptic, you may not believe that, or you may be skeptical towards that claim that faith is a source of knowledge. But I just want to invite you to consider these arguments for the existence of God, for the truth of Christianity, as witnesses to that reality. And that may leave you just a tad bit more open to God revealing Himself to you in a way that you might not expect. There's a whole lot more to be said about knowledge, about certainty, about arguments for Christianity. And I definitely plan on getting into that on this channel. So if you're fascinated by that sort of thing, I just encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, because we definitely gonna be diving into it. But in the meantime, let me know how y'all feel about this whole idea of arguments and proofs as witnesses, as testimonies to the reality of the Christian faith. Till next time, grace and peace, Soli Deo Gloria.